used to be Richard Beamer. You're listening to Twin Peaks Unwrapped.
Welcome to Twin Peaks Unwrapped. I'm your host, Ben Durant, and beside me is...
Brian Kazaska. How's it going, Ben?
It's going well. We got another community rewatch. We are madmen. We are crazy. We're going to do another 4 episodes. We're getting closer to June with the 30th anniversary of the last episode. So here is our panel.
Hello, this is Andy Bentley.
Hello, this is Josh Minton.
And this is Courtenay Stallings.
And here's the unseen players.
Hey everybody, this is John Salinas from the Hellboy Book Club podcast. And today I'll be playing Jerry Horne, Andy Brennan, and narrating one of the scenes.
Hi, this is Sophia Koikas, reading the part of Catherine.
Hey, Twin Peaks Unwrapped Multiverse, it's Bill Abelson. I'm doing Andrew Packard, Resurrected, and narrator in the rowboat scene. Was Annie's boy John Justice Wheeler? Was it Johnny Horne?
Hi, I'm Joyce Picker, and I'm playing Lucy and Narrator.
Hello, this is Chris Mathews. I'll be doing the roles of Thomas Eckhardt and Narrator.
I'm Caitlin, and I'll be playing the Narrator.
Hi, this is Cathy, Caitlin's mom, and I'll be playing Jones and the operator.
Hi, this is Bob Klier, known to some of the TPU crew as Killer Robert. I'm reading parts for Deputy Hawk and for a Pine Weasel-focused Ben Horne.
Hi, this is Katie Roarty, and I'll be playing Audrey Horne and the Narrator.
Hello, this is Andy Bentley. I will be playing Bobby and a certain wine connoisseur, also named Andy.
Hi, I'm Robin Lynne Norris, and I'm playing Audrey and the Narrator.
Hi, I'm Peter Hallin, and I'm playing Cooper.
My name is Colt Wilson. I'm playing Sheriff Harry Truman.
Hey, this is Julia Rollo, and I'm playing Josie and the Narrator.
This is Diane Nelson. I'm a narrator and Annie.
Hi, my name is Yvette, and I'm reading Narrator and Lana.
This is Diana Stavroulakis, and I'll be playing the part of the indomitable Catherine Martell.
My name is Maya Adkins, and I will be playing Annie Blackburn.
Hey everybody, this is Marcel Fraser, and I'll be playing Dick Tremaine.
Well, this is great. I'm so glad to have you all on together. I don't think we've ever all been together. I imagine Courtenay and Josh, you guys know each other well, I imagine, because through Scott Ryan.
Well, we've all stayed together in the same apartment, like old hippies in London when we were there. And Courtenay was one of the very first correspondents for the Red Room, so we've known each other for years and years.
That's right. That's so cool. You're right. There would be, I don't remember, it was like a university and they had a panel of Twin Peaks actors and writers. And Courtenay, you got the scoop, didn't you?
Yeah, the University of Southern California in 2013 did a retrospective covering all the first 2 seasons of Twin Peaks and Fire Walk with Me over a period of 5 months. And it was for USC film students, but it was open to the public. And I covered it for the Red Room podcast.
That's so awesome.
Cool.
So we're covering 4 episodes, and I'm calling the first episode 23, The Condemned Woman. This is the episode that Josie dies. So that's how I remember it, and I also remember it as the one episode I missed in the original run. It's like blasphemy. How could I miss an episode? Actually, it was like a high school dance or something, and I decided to go to it. And I think with the Gulf War and there was so much going on, I don't even think I knew that it aired and stuff until afterwards. And I don't think it was till like VHS tapes that I got to see this episode. So what an episode to miss.
I remember I would tape Buffy and my VHS didn't go off. And I ran home and I just turned on at the end. And it was her swapping bodies with Faith. And I was like, wait, what? And, back then there was no way to, you had to hope for the summer it would show up again.
Yeah, with hope.
Yeah.
Andy, do you want to tell us what interests you about this episode?
I'm sure a lot of people are going to talk about the ending with Josie. I say tangentially to that, when you've kind of been a part of a fandom, you think you've seen it all, but then you get this one thing where it's like, whoa, I didn't actually know that. For me, it was finding out Richard Bramer, that he photographed Josie's body double in that all-night taping. That was the one Twin Peaks fact where it was like, I thought I knew everything, and then suddenly there was this little extra gem that really, made you think.
Yeah, you wonder where that would have gone.
The only other thing is you can clearly tell it's like, all right, we need to get the 3 actresses something to do when they're putting together the pieces of paper and, everything.
Blue Pine Lodge, morning. Andrew Packard and Catherine Martell sit at the kitchen table, sipping coffee.
What's happening with Ghostwood?
I spoke with our investors. The meeting's set. I fly to Paris tomorrow.
Andrew, I've been thinking.
About a shopping mall.
Near the industrial park.
No, right next to the Great Northern, adjacent to the new hotel I want to build.
I'm sure Ben will appreciate the competition.
I think it's the least I can do, don't you?
Catherine pauses and peers out the window.
Oh, good. Company.
The back door opens and Josie walks in, carrying a bundle of kindling. She stops cold, staring at Andrew. It can't be. She drops the wood and moves closer, eyes wide with horror.
Dear Josie, I'm home. Did you miss me?
Josie passes out cold. Neither Andrew or Catherine move.
She seems surprised.
Poor thing. Couldn't even pull off a simple murder.
She has her charms, though.
True, but not for long.
I actually thought this was an interesting cut. For me, it's always interesting because you think about them in the cutting booth, like, we got to shave, 47 seconds off of this so we can get that extra commercial in there. So this is one of those ones that kind of convinced me, like, yeah, you could tighten that up. If it were a paragraph, you could take a couple of phrases out of that, and I feel like that was what they did here.
Yeah, I like the line that Catherine said she wanted to make a shopping mall, and I think she wanted a hotel next to the Great Northern. And how can we get back at Ben? And
I love that line. I love how devious Catherine Martell is, and she's this businesswoman and she's tough, and I love her dynamic with her brother in the scene too.
I mean, I guess if I was thinking about why they pulled back on the economic stuff, that idea of having a competing hotel, it's really interesting considering what Ghostwood ends up becoming, which is a private prison. That idea of, it's throughout Twin Peaks, by the way, that idea of abusing the land to turn it into a commercial real estate venture. It's in the pilot, and it goes all the way through, I would say, till the very end of Jerry Horne's storyline, certainly. So it's interesting to see them pull back on that from a network television perspective, but yet they went kind of all in on it in the Showtime version.
Yep.
And you're talking about Mark Frost's book, The Land Became a Prison.
Great Northern Hotel, Bay. Thomas Eckhardt hands his assistant, Jones, a stack of cash. Her suitcase is open on the bed.
The entire amount.
Jones reacts, pleased.
I trust you'll finish the job, regardless of what happens tonight.
Eckhardt catches Jones's hand as she takes the money.
Surely you of all people know what happens when my trust is violated.
He pulls a garrote out of her bracelet, wraps it around her wrists, kisses her.
Check out. Drive north for a day. I'll wrap up my affairs and be gone by morning. Come back tomorrow night and finish up.
Jones smiles.
Yes, sir.
This is with Eckhardt and Jones. So this is a deleted scene. This didn't make it into the show.
Is this the lady who played Sue Ellen Mischke in Seinfeld? Is this the same lady as that Jones?
I believe it is, right?
Okay. So I liked her character a lot. This I thought was completely out of place given how well they introduced her and used her in the next couple episodes. So I'm a big fan of cutting this particular scene.
Yeah, because this scene really kind of sets it up to say you have a job to do and here's the money. And right, in the show, it was so mysterious where she goes to Truman and all of a sudden she's choking him. And yeah, I agree. But it was interesting. I mean, they have such a complicated relationship because he's like, at one point they kiss and I don't know what their relationship is, but at the same time, he seems like he kind of a violent relationship. It's an odd relationship.
Well, you mean Josie had a pretty terrible relationship with him as well. I mean, like these call girls, assassins, spies, like they could have had their own show, really. It's like an Alias or something, that idea of who this girl was, an alternate Josie, a white Josie, inside of the show, coming to kind of be the second assassin. I thought it was pretty cool, actually.
Yeah, and I think you're right. I think the less we know about her, the more, because she's such a small character anyway, and I think the more interesting she is, and how she kind of functions. So I can see why the scene was cut, that we don't know as much about her dynamic with Eckhardt or what she's doing and all that.
Courtney, what is something that interests you about this episode?
Well, I'm going to go really minor because I feel like there's so much you can say about this episode. And I could talk forever about Joan Chen and Josie, but I love the concierge when Audrey, Audrey is at the Great Northern and she's trying to do the different roles. And she goes to the concierge, and I don't know the actor's name, but the man who plays the concierge is like, I'm going to have a salty tear in my eye. And he's like, maybe your next stint will be in housekeeping. And I love this minor character because he kind of puts her in her place, even though she's like, she's Audrey Horne. And I think he's hilarious. And I love, season 2 doesn't get enough credit for those like little tiny things that happen. They're so great and funny. And I love that concierge.
You really could have done so much more. I mean, you could do a whole show just with the Great Northern, because there are some really interesting characters there. And then you think about all the different people that come there and the guests, and you have cheerleaders coming by and the bands. But you could have had a whole big storyline just in the Great Northern. But
yeah, there's a very shining element to it, right? That idea of this haunted hotel that's haunted by the ghosts of the past.
Right. Love it.
Interior Ben Horne's office, day. Order has been restored. Around the conference table are the Great Northern board members, Ben, Audrey, and Jerry, who is making black olive paste canapes. John Wheeler sits down between Bobby and Audrey. Audrey takes a wary look at the stranger. Wheeler returns a smile. Jerry passes his canapes around, and Ben clears his throat. Begins.
I've asked Mr. Wheeler to our board. Years ago, I invested in him. A pittance he built into an empire. I take no credit, but I believed in Jack, even when he was just another local boy pounding nails. I have asked him to return the favor by believing in me now.
Wheeler nods assent. Ben pauses with requisite drama, at least long enough for Jerry to finish chomping on a rather hefty canapé, and begins.
Horne Industries Incorporated have fallen on hard times. The mill and Ghostwood lands are now solely owned by Catherine Martell. We don't begrudge her the mill. It was and is, after all, hers. But we sweated blood to make Ghostwood ours for a doggone decade. Retail revenues at the department store are down 14%. And as for the hotel, well, let's just say it's off-season and leave it at that.
Ben, over in Sicily, I had this marketing brainstorm. We set up a special package deal. Twin Peaks, land of crime. See where Laura Palmer was murdered. See where her body was found. Visit Maddie Ferguson's final resting place. I call it the Homicide Gateway.
Everyone looks at Jerry like he's lost his mind.
Thank you, Jer. We'll put it on the agenda for further review. But in spite of these reversals, stripped of the trappings of success, what are we left with? The human spirit. I've been taking a good, hard look at my own soul, and I've decided it's high time Ben Horne gave something back to society.
Ben, not the hotel.
No, not the hotel. What's the greatest gift one human being can give to another? The future.
Ben goes over to a draped easel in the corner and removes the cloth, revealing a large Audubon-style drawing of a weasel.
I give you the pine weasel, found only in our Tri-County area, targeted by the Environmental Defense League and the Wilderness Society, nearly extinct.
They're incredible roasted. A ginger and garlic marinade, a glass of Sauvignon Blanc.
According to an environmental impact report I commissioned, what few pine weasels remain will be all but wiped out by the Packard plans for Ghostwood development.
You want to save the pine weasel?
Not just the pine weasel. Life as we know it. I want Twin Peaks to remain unspoiled in an era of vast environmental carnage.
But development is progress. People, money.
Not always. Ben, if I could interrupt.
Please, Jack.
What Ben's talking about is quality of life, something we don't consider much in the business world. It's my experience that a corporation like Horne Industries is not just a vehicle for making money, but for expressing values, too.
Audrey looks at Wheeler, irked by the interruption. Interested, too.
So we block Catherine's development until the wheel turns and we get another shot. Brilliant, Ben. Brilliant.
I intend to fight Ghostwood development on every ground with every available weapon. This little weasel is about to become a household word.
Then what?
I'm considering a run for the Senate.
When you look back at Jerry and Ben Horne, at this point, they had so little redeeming qualities. I mean, they were essentially child molesters, first of all. Second of all, they were unscrupulous businessmen who took advantage of the natural world around them, as well as tried to get an angle on every single person except for the other one. Just, it's a real hard redemption story for these two. I think at this point, that's what hit me.
Jerry goes into Twin Peaks. He said here that we've got a special package deal here. Twin Peaks, land of crime. See where Laura Palmer was murdered. See the body, mentioning Maddie and all this. And, it's a getaway. But the sad thing is, like, this is 30 years ago. This is something that really is around now. Like, these are, there's packages out there.
Murder for hire podcasts. I mean, like that.
Jerry's line is just, it's hilarious because he goes out there and he kind of brings in Laura Palmer. Sometimes I feel like these characters forget anything happened. A lot of times we're just moving on to other storylines. Like, it's like, there was just a murder last week. Like, are we not shocked by that at all?
Yeah, when Heather Graham brings it up, it feels like the first time it's been in the front of season 2 in a long time.
Josh, what interests you about this episode?
Yeah, I mean, I said that idea again of bringing the girls together. I know it was a little silly and contrite, but I think it was really important. I haven't seen these episodes in probably 7 years, so I've been living up season 3's butt for so long. It was kind of refreshing to get back and actually hear the music, and seeing Kenneth Welsh after meeting him a few years ago, like that's him, that's that guy. That's his spirit. He brought that right into the role. I really loved his performance, and this is the end, if I'm correct, the end of the Donna or the James and Evelyn story, because he and Donna have that out. That's a blessed moment in Twin Peaks when that storyline ends for good. That's really a mercy that the writers had on the viewer there.
After 5 episodes or so, we had.
Oh my Lord! Yeah, that was they really stretched the limits of loyalty there. But I think the picnic scene was actually beautiful. As I was looking at it on the widescreen, it was just like that. It was framed and filmed. It was a silly scene, but it just was gorgeous up on the screen. So I really liked that. Last thing that I noticed was Cooper actually sees Bob and the little man from another place. He actually sees them in the room. So it's not a dream. It's not like it's a legit hallucination or a blending of this dream world and the reality. I think that's really important. That's an important moment. It struck out to me at least.
It sets up season 3 in some ways, because we have, Dougie and the one-armed man kind of communicating through, 2 different worlds.
Yeah, that last scene is like, it brings it back. It's like we're kind of going back to season 1, the beginning of season 2, where all that stuff was just forgotten about for so long. So that's an interesting scene too. It plays weird. It always played weird for me, but with season 3, I think it plays better. But when I first saw it, I was just like, shouldn't they be in the red room? It feels like you're not abiding by your own rules that you've laid out for us. But then with season 3, there is that rule breaking. So I guess going back now, it makes more sense.
I mean, the little man from another place dancing on the bed seemed out of.
It just seemed way out of place for me.
I mean, I think if you could have made a hole and you could have seen that, you could have the little man from another place could have still been in the red room and somehow in that space, I think it would have felt a little better. But
yeah, it reminds me of how you told me the last episode with the dentist and how
spoilers. We haven't gotten there yet.
But how they were going to make Bob a dentist. So I kind of feel like the writers are like, how can we be Lynch but our own version of that? And it just doesn't land, like, I think we would have been crazy if we saw Bob as a dentist. That would have been very bizarre.
Yeah.
So,
I don't know if that was their way of trying to scare us or trying to, things that are uncomfortable. We don't like dentists. So, but that's for another show.
I know.
Interior, Great Northern dining room, night. Ben goes to the kitchen to save Jerry from getting stabbed by the cook. Audrey turns to Wheeler, fixes him with a level stare. She's determined to remain unimpressed, and she won't call him Jack.
So which is it, Mr. Wheeler? Are we bankrupt or just failing?
I'm here to do an old friend a favor.
My father's friends are rarer than the pine weasel.
Ben was once a very good friend to me.
And so you came to bring us all up to speed. You are Santa Claus, Mr. Wheeler. I better hang my stocking.
You don't like me much, do you, Audrey?
I don't have an opinion either way.
But if you did?
If I did, I'd say that the Hornes have managed to take care of themselves just fine for more years than you can count. and desperate though we may seem, will probably continue to do so in the foreseeable future.
Audrey's matching his direct tone, adding a little bit of her father's flamboyance. She waits for Wheeler to respond, react. A beat, and he begins to laugh.
What's so funny?
I was just remembering. Heidi. It's no big deal.
Heidi again. I was 10. I don't know what that has to do with anything.
Somehow, Ben convinced Pete Martell to play the goat. He had these horns on, and you know Pete. He'd bleat and baa to wake the dead, loud enough that we couldn't hear poor Heidi's lines. So you kicked him. Hard. Right where he lives, as I recall.
I didn't mean to hurt him.
Pete started yowling even louder. For real this time, and precious, innocent little Heidi turned to the audience, pigtails and deep dark eyes, and smiled. 10 years old, and you made it very clear. Don't tread on me. Sorry. It's just that a minute ago I was starting to feel like one of Heidi's goats. Sparked a memory.
Where have you been all this time? I mean, when you weren't rescuing widows and orphans and making our world a better place to live in.
The far corners of the earth. It's glorious out there, Audrey. But all in all, it's nice to be back home.
Wheeler says it simply, without effect. Audrey's never met a man like him before, with a single exception, Agent Cooper. And that goes straight to the heart of her.
I'm only 18.
Excuse me?
Nothing. Look at the time. Tell my father, okay? I've got an appointment. See ya, Jack.
Flustered, not sure exactly what she's feeling, Audrey makes a sudden exit. Wheeler sits back, as fascinated now as he was back then, and watches her go.
Originally, Wheeler sees Audrey at the Great Northern, and he says, I remember you, you were Heidi and stuff. And this scene actually explains more about Heidi. But I guess it shows how strong Audrey is. Like, she was tough even as a young girl. She's going to be heard.
I want Audrey to be happy. I hated the John Justice Wheeler story the first time I watched this show. It was total, like, get through it. But this time I kind of looked at it through that lens of, you know, I have to look through the returns lens and that idea of this lady's finally happy. Like, she had a chance right here to be happy, and somehow that got thrown off track. I was really rooting for her.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, I know a lot of people wanted to get Audrey and Cooper to get together. Talked about this before. I think that would have been really problematic because of the conflict of interest of the case and also the age difference and power dynamic. But I understand why people wanted that. I mean, they had such great chemistry. I get it. And but I love, and I kind of felt that way about the relationship originally too. I was like, who is this guy coming in? But the more I watch it, the more I'm like, oh, they really are good for each other. They really are a match. They have this history since they were kids, and you know, she's really showing her power around him. And I don't know, I like their dynamic now.
Great Northern lobby, night. Sheriff Truman strides through the lobby over to the house phone. He picks it up.
Agent Cooper, please.
Cooper's room. Cooper's loading his pistol. The phone rings. He uncoils, answering it.
Cooper? Yes, Catherine. No, I was just on my way out there. She's here now? Thomas Eckhardt. All right.
Truman is still on the phone.
I'm sorry, that line is still busy.
Truman hangs up and heads for the elevators. Hotel corridor. Cooper walks down a hall and around a corner. We hear shouting. Cooper moves more quickly. Cooper now stands outside the door.
No, not as long as I live.
Cooper kicks the door open just as a shot is fired. Josie lying on the bed with Eckhardt, both faces frozen, eyes wide open. It's not clear who's done what to whom. Eckhardt rises from the bed, starts towards Cooper, a knife in his hand. Then Cooper sees the blood seeping from a wound in his chest. Eckhardt stops. Josie pulls her arm out from under the covers, pointing the smoking gun at Cooper. Eckhardt collapses. Josie holds the gun on Cooper. She's wearing traditional Chinese peasant clothes that are half open, half off. No makeup, looking more like the girl she used to be.
He tried to kill me.
Is that what you'll say about me? Josie, I'm not armed.
Behind Cooper, Truman steps through the open door, unseen, but listening.
What about Jonathan? Was he trying to kill you too?
He was taking me back.
Truman draws his gun.
And me? Why did you shoot me, Josie?
You asked too many questions. I knew this day was coming. I won't go to jail. I can't.
Truman steps out into the room, points his gun at Josie.
Put it down, Josie.
Josie can't bear to look at Truman. Tears roll down her face, but the gun holds steady.
Put it down.
Harry, forgive me. I had no right to hurt you.
She cocks the gun, still pointed at Cooper. Truman cocks his own gun.
I'm begging you, don't make me do this.
She looks at him one more time, whispers goodbye. She turns the gun on herself. Her hands start shaking. She exhales sharply, twice. Her body seizes up and she collapses on the floor. Truman rushes to her.
Josie? Josie!
Truman turns to Cooper.
She's dead.
Cooper looks at them and senses something more. Josie and Truman disappear. A bright light appears in the room. In a hole, in that light, Cooper sees the little man from his dream, dancing by, then replaced by the face of Bob, laughing demonically. That image fades. Truman reappears, kneeling down, holding the body of Josie. Cooper continues to watch them, trying to make sense of what he's seen. Drifting over to a chest of drawers, settling on a circular drawer pull. The grain of the wood seems to waver momentarily and shift, and in it, we see the tortured, screaming features of Josie.
I think the big thing out of this is that it explains a little bit more why Josie wanted to kill Cooper. And she's saying, you asked too many questions. I think Cooper made her nervous.
Am I correct that the actress who played Josie actually requested to be written out? Because she had like a movie on the way?
Either a movie on the way or she was just done with Twin Peaks. She just didn't want to be involved anymore. And
I think she was in Oliver Stone's Heaven and Earth. I think that was being filmed at the same time.
Okay.
She was great in that movie. One of the things that popped out to me when I was reading through this is in the narrator section at the bottom of one of those pages, it says Josie and Truman disappear. And I did a double take when I read that. I'm like, what? And then I realized, instead of Bob and the little man from the other place appearing, Josie and Truman disappeared. Which is a totally different reading of that scene, I think. At least it was for me.
Yeah. It's almost more like Cooper and the Giant when he's in the roadhouse, that he's watching Julie Cruz and then the world disappears and there's the giant kind of communicating, which I think would feel a little bit better. I mentioned this on the last show, but I still think there was a missed opportunity. Wyndham Earle should have killed Josie. The idea that there's just these random people getting killed, but to actually have somebody that we all knew from the first episode, from the first scene of Twin Peaks, to actually kill off Josie, I think that would have brought in everybody a little closer. It would have had more. Harry Truman would have been more affected, and he would have wanted to go after Wyndham Earle. I don't know. I understand they wanted to finish off her storyline, but at the same time, boy, I wish it could have been found a way to do that and just had her be a victim of Wyndham Earle.
It's not a bad
idea. One of those Needful Things. I'm a huge Stephen King fan. So that old novel Needful Things, where this guy comes in, sets up this little tinker shop and basically starts fooling with everyone's lives around them to produce the most amount of misery that he possibly could. I feel like that would have leaned in really hard and well into where the storyline was here. That idea of Wyndham Earle is just out there. He's a farmer and he's farming misery and trauma, and he gets it all to the point where it's ready to be harvested, and he just chops the heads off of all these people that he's made miserable for a few weeks. And then Bob drinks pure Garmonbosia. I feel like that if they could have really ran with that, that would have been really something.
That would have been something.
Yeah, Ben, I like that idea a lot because I think it ups the ante. And Kenneth Welsh said he loved playing that character, Wyndham Earle, because it was like a Shakespearean villain. And I think that would have been very Shakespearean to have, like you said, like Truman would have been so invested in Wyndham Earle, and to really show how evil Wyndham Earle is, and her death by him would have been really incredible.
Yeah. It's always easy to go back and look at it. It's like, why didn't you do this? And I'm sure the writer's like, we're just trying to keep this show going.
Yeah.
We're on to episode 24, which is Wounds and Scars. And I'll start again with Andy. What interests you about this episode?
I would say the costuming. There is, not only from our Kenneth Welch, but the hat on Justice Wheeler, the glam tuxedo on Squeaky at the end. I think they put the costume department through the works on this one.
Brian, I say every time, there must be a costume shop in town, because it seems like as the season goes on, there's more and more costumes, and they got to be ready for Miss Twin Peaks. And I mean, you got
Wyndham Earle is like the number one shopper. I mean, he's always there.
Nobody had more fun filming Twin Peaks than Kenneth Walsh.
Yeah.
That dude was having a ball.
Bookhouse entrance, night. Standing beside the door is Andy.
Agent Cooper, Hawk, the sheriff's gone off. He's broken every piece of furniture that's not nailed down and shot out the ceiling lights. I honestly don't know what to do.
It's okay, Andy.
He is clearly frightened. Cooper and Hawk follow a trail of broken furniture. Truman sits in darkness, a bottle of Jack Daniels beside him, gun in hand.
Hello, Coop. How's business?
A little complicated at the moment.
Nice thing about the law, it doesn't breathe.
Truman eyes his gun.
You can't kill it.
Harry, let's make this simple. Why don't you hand me that gun?
Don't think I've handed my gun over to anybody my entire life.
This might be the time.
You know something I've never done? I've never really left Twin Peaks. Ever. Never crossed the ocean. I was the one who stayed. Then Josie came to town. My life was different. It was better. And now she's gone.
Your life belongs to you, Harry. Josie didn't take it with her.
When I walked in that room, and it looked like I might have to shoot her, I know she lied. I know she was evil. I looked into her eyes, watched the life drain out of them. She was so helpless. She needed me, and there was nothing I could do.
With that, Truman completely unravels, knocking over the bottle.
It didn't have to end like that. She didn't have to die.
The gun's aim swings into wider, more dangerous circles. Cooper steps in, pulls Truman into a bear hug. Truman grabs onto him, finally allowing himself some comfort.
Easy.
The sheriff's arms extend despondently, the gun dangling from his hand. Hawk takes it.
There's so much I don't understand.
We're all like that, Harry.
The whole fact that Truman is recognizing that she wasn't perfect and that she had problems, I think was good. And I guess, I don't know if it was as clear in the show. I think in the show he was just so miserable. But to have these lines where he's kind of saying, you know what, and he's blinded, but he realizes that, you know, she wasn't a good person. I don't know if he'd go far as evil. Sometimes she seems like a victim, and sometimes she seems like she did a lot of bad things, but to call her evil, maybe taking it too far.
Correct. She's in the gray area, really.
I like the part where he talks about how he never left Twin Peaks, and he meets this woman who was international. And I mean, you could kind of see, like, I mean, Josie's compelling for so many reasons. I mean, she's beautiful, all these things. You can kind of see how, like, somebody from a small town meets somebody who's so worldly. And you can see, like, how that would transform him in so many ways. So I love that line that he has there.
This is one of those moments where you get to see the limit of Harry Truman, you know, what he's capable of. And this is his limit. This is what he's been pushed beyond his limit in this point. And that's where it's so important that he has a friendship with someone like Dale, who can pull him over, you know, who can be that voice of wisdom, because Cooper's going to need that same voice himself very soon. You know, so this idea of friendship being a connecting force that can help us get over those moments of our limitations, I think it's really powerful, and it really would have shown a lot more of Truman here if they would have kept this in.
And Courtney, what interests you about this episode?
Well, I love Annie Blackburn. So when she's introduced, I always get excited when she's introduced, because I feel like it's kind of I love her character. I like her dynamic with Cooper, but I also feel like it's the beginning of the end, you know, when she's introduced. And that scene where, you know, she meets Cooper and they're in the Double R Diner, and then Wyndham Earl is like across the way. People don't realize he's there because he's in disguise. And I realized, like, Wyndham Earl is, like, always kind of in the background, like foreshadowing that he's like the third character of this relationship, kind of like with Caroline and Cooper too. And so I love that juxtaposition of Cooper and Annie meeting and having this really great dynamic, and then Wyndham Earl's in the background. So, you know, this is not going to go well.
And Josh, what about you? What interests you about this episode?
So there were actually a few things that really jumped out at me. You know, the first one was I noticed that during the scene with Annie in the diner, the music that was playing there, I mean, it really is an emotional cue inside of Twin Peaks. It tells you how to feel and kind of what it's about. The music never, ever lies to you. But when it's gone in the return, that's actually a deliberate absence, you know. I love the Log Lady's backstory. I think that, you know, when Mark Frost was able to flush that out in the secret history of Twin Peaks, was really cool. Actually, that may have been the final dossier. I can't remember which one, but I love that backstory, and I love how connected that is to Carl Rod, for example, in that book. So hearing that was like really, really cool to know that they were thinking that long ago. Everett McGill is so funny when he's uncomfortable, which is the whole show, basically. You got to keep in mind, the first time I ever came across Everett McGill was as the dickhead in not Full Metal Jacket, but Heartbreak Ridge with Clint Eastwood. So I'd watched him for years and hated him in that movie because he was so good as a terrible guy. So to see him in this role was a little bit different. This is my favorite role, a quiet, fussy man who is just put under duress. That's like my favorite thing in the world to watch in comedy or drama. So that was cool. I loved Ankian going full Shatner twice in this episode.
Yes.
And he did it twice, and he did a great job with it. It made me laugh both times. I also laughed when the scene where Mike is checking in with Nadine into the hotel, and he's wearing this jacket 2 sizes too large for him. And I just thought, like, what would insurance manager Mike have to say to this guy? What would he say to him if he could meet him and go back to him? And then the last thing was how funny Dick Tremaine was in the fashion show. That is pure comedy. They're coming out with all them clothes, and he's like, a plethora of plaid. It's just a really, really, really funny performance I didn't really appreciate the first time I watched it.
We're on to the next episode, episode 25, On the Wings of Love. Andy, do you want to share with us what interests you about this episode?
I think Al Cave always, comes to mind here. And, the lynch scene, obviously, is just, in the diner is a complete all-timer.
Classic.
Ben with the carrot, for sure, chomping on the carrot. I think the odd, it's just, a little letter from James saying, goodbye.
And James Marsh, I believe he I can't remember what movie, but I think he left from the show because he had movies. I don't remember if it was Gladiator or
A Few Good Men.
Yeah.
And this is always like the turning point to me.
What?
David Lynch says, cut it out, put him in a goddamn suit, and we're going to start doing stuff,
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, you brought up Owl Cave, so here's another extended scene.
Double R Diner, day. Annie stands in front of booth with Cooper and Truman. Annie glances down at Cooper's napkin, where he has been doodling.
What are you drawing?
Cooper looks down at his napkin. He's doodling the tattoos on the log lady and Major Briggs.
Oh, nothing. A couple of tattoos.
Annie looks longer at the napkin.
Funny. Looks like the rocks in Owl Cave.
She moves off. Cooper watches her go, a little moonstruck. Another look at the napkin. Then Cooper snaps back on the beam.
Owl Cave? What's Owl Cave?
It's up near Pearl Lakes, old Indian territory. It's supposed to be sacred ground. We used to go there when we were kids.
Truman takes the napkin.
My God, it does. It does look like it.
Sounds like we better go there now.
What I thought was interesting about this is that Leland talks about Pearl Lakes, because that's where his grandparents are from.
I believe that's the same area in the Secret History where the Nez Perce, the native tribe that lived there, that actually had the jewel or whatever it was that became the ring, I believe it was. That's where that was kept at. It was kind of a sacred and terrible place like the Pet Cemetery.
Yeah, and this episode was written by Harley Payton and Bob Ingalls and directed by Dwayne Dunham. So it feels like, okay, now we're getting into Twin Peaks. We're getting into mythology. It definitely has a Mark Frost feel, but it's like those other powerhouses are, running this episode too. So getting into that.
I guess the big thing of taking those Truman lines out of it is it kind of made it Annie's point of view, where she's like, this is just something I know, as opposed to like, this is communal mythology. We know about this. Everyone knows about this. We used to go up there and drink beers and stare at it, and it was really weird. I don't know why they would have cut that out. I feel like that would have been an aid to the story they were telling and not detract in any way.
I mean, a lot of times I sometimes think they have to cut things because of commercials. Like they're trying to fit everything in, and it's like, we can't fit this in. But
There were a few things, of course, that jumped out on this one too. I actually do think that this is one of the best Twin Peaks episodes for the exact reason that Courtenay just said. We had the three probably, powerhouse minds besides the two creators that just kind of converged on this episode and really turned in a nice mythology-based episode. Now, years later, I would come to recognize these in the X-Files as my favorite episodes of the show. So anytime they dealt with the mythology and the mechanics and the weirdness behind the story we've been watching for so long, I think that's where shows like this really shine. A couple things that jumped out at me: this bonsai, like the idea of the bonsai on the counter. Not only was it hilarious when Lynch screamed into it, that was a funny scene, but bonsai is also on the side table of the room in The Return where Sam and Tracy get massacred. So this idea, they call it, I think the quote was, it's the ultimate miniature. For some reason, it really jumped out at me. I'm like, that's kind of interesting. It's like its own miniature little world, kind of like what happens in season 3. Earl had a suitcase very similar to the one Mr. C has in the hotel room, or motel room, I should say. I thought that was interesting. And then, as Andy said, that diner scene has to be one of the best scenes in all of Twin Peaks. Like with it's just a beautiful, beautiful 4 minutes of television. Big fan of that scene.
With Gordon Cole and everything that's happened. Yeah.
Well, he falls in love and he can hear for the first time. This is it's just a really, really nice scene.
Classic scene. Yeah.
Truman gets to flip the "How long you been in love with her" line on him, and he's always getting one up on Harry, and Harry finally gets one up on him.
Right.
And Courtenay, you mentioned the writers and the directors, but having maybe David Lynch on the set. I mean, he's the actor, he's not technically there, but to have co-creator of the show on set, he probably had times where he said, I want to do it this way, and what about doing this? And I'm sure he had his times where he could direct people even though he's not the director.
Right. Oh yeah, I mean, of course, and just like, I mean, you got to figure, like, if I were on a crew or an actor, I would definitely be upping my game if you were around, for sure. If you were Mark Ross around, yeah. And I would say, like, my what I take away from that episode, I mean, there's so much, because it's like Josh said, it's a great episode. I love the humor in Twin Peaks, and I love the hangover cure that Cooper and Gordon Cole mentioned. Truman. And I think it's so brilliant. It makes me laugh every single time when they give off a list of things that you would never eat or drink if you had a hangover, unless you wanted to get rid of everything in your stomach. I love that. I love the scene in the diner. And I love, again, I'm an Annie Blackburn fan, so I love that scene at the end when she's ordering a drink, and she's not innocent in some ways because she's had this like dark thing happen, but she's like new in the world. And I love that dynamic with her and Cooper. She gets a rum and Coke, rum and tonic, I think it is. And then he comes up and they have this conversation about, her ranch in the world, and he loves to see the world through her eyes. I love that moment. I think it's so sweet and builds that relationship.
That's a great scene.
So I think we can move on to episode 26, Variations on Revelations. I guess we'll start with Andy again. What interests you about this episode?
Well, I do enjoy the 1990s graphics of Earl's map right there in the beginning. Another great Lynch scene in the diner, and definitely remember the gazebo thing that sticks out very heavily. But I'd have to say my number one would be the graphics that you see during Major Briggs talking, because we never really kind of left filming to do art like this. It really was just always stuck out in the shadowy image. It's it's not really sure what's going on there. That really is, I think, what sticks out the most.
And of course, Andy, you've worked on our graphics for Twitter and Facebook and stuff like that. So if anybody knows about graphics, it's you. I mean, that's your thing.
Blue Pine Lodge study day. Harry Truman sits with Catherine and discusses Josie.
If there's anything you can tell me about her at all, anything to help me understand.
For instance?
What did she want? Why did she do the things she did?
I'm asking myself a lot of the same questions.
I want to know. I want to believe she wasn't all bad. There was something good there. Decent.
I think early in her life, she must have learned the lesson that she could survive by being what other people wanted to see, showing them that. It was probably something she had no choice about. And I think that eventually became the largest truth in her life. In time, even she no longer knew who she truly was. I don't know quite how to say this, she lost her center. What was left of her private self she may never have shown anyone.
So the lies, all the stories.
Who knows? They may not have seemed untrue to her. What she needed to believe was always shifting to suit the moment. A ball of knots, knotted, tangled string. In spite of everything she tried to do to me and my family, I find it's curiously hard to hate her for it.
She was so beautiful.
Of course, Josie was her main nemesis, so it's kind of like, asking Khan about Kirk in many ways. Yeah, I'm not a fan of the original scene they left in there. I thought that was kind of an odd pairing for him to go to her for any kind of consolence as it was. But boy, she is great in that scene, though. Catherine, she was something. She gaslit the shit out of him. That's true.
That's right. It was like, she probably doesn't know who she is because I pretty much destroyed her. You remember a couple of days ago you came by? Yeah, she was my personal maid, and she was pretty much a slave to me. And Truman's like, "Oh, are you all right?" It's like, do you not realize that she's not in a good situation here? Oh man, Courtney, what do you think? What interests you about this episode?
A lot. And I'm going to go back to Annie, Blackburn, and Cooper, because I love that scene when they're on the lake. And it's just such a beautifully shot scene and such a great moment. And it's shot on Malibu Lake and in Southern California, outside of Los Angeles. And then again, they're having this wonderful moment. And in the background, Wyndham Earle's, intruding on that moment. And of course, we find the guy at the end, Sam Raimi's brother, is killed in the gazebo.
Yep.
And I just think that's a great moment of establishing this like beautiful, lovely romantic scene, and then Wyndham Earle. It's like really foreshadowing like everything that's to come, and it's like the terrible things that are to come with Annie and Cooper.
Lake, day, the small rowboat. Cooper pulls in the oars. They'll drift together.
I used to swim out here when I was a kid. Every summer, 2 or 3 times a week.
I can understand why. It's beautiful.
I guess even then I felt a closer connection to nature than I did to people. I was kind of a weird kid.
Really? How?
That's what people used to say. I never had many friends. Norma was Miss Popularity. Seemed like she was always moving towards the world. I was always moving away from it. I lived in my head mostly.
Not a bad neighborhood.
Well, there were some pretty strange neighbors.
Boyfriends?
No, I had one.
High school?
Senior year.
Anything to do with your going into the convent?
I'm sorry, do you mind if we don't talk about it?
We can talk about whatever you like.
I want to come back to the world. I was so frightened for so long of everything, of life. I thought I'd be safe there. Everybody here thought I was nuts. And when I think about it, it was such a weird 19th century thing to do. To think I could remove myself as if that could stop the noise in my head when the problem was me. It was always in me. It was always in me.
I understand.
Silence, prayer. It wasn't the religion. It could have been a Buddhist retreat. Walled-in pond, a quiet room. But you sit in a room like that long enough and you realize, I realized, that I was just hiding, and that running away from my fear didn't make the fear go away.
It made it stronger.
Yes. So I had to face it. I had to face myself. And I have to do it here, where everything went so wrong.
Cooper takes her hand. She lets him hold it. He touches the scars on her wrists. She doesn't withdraw the hand. Looks at him.
I know how hopeless things can seem. I know the kind of dark tunnel you can fall into.
It happened before I went away. It happened because of that boy. I went away because of it. That's all you need to know.
Cooper nods.
Annie, I had a similar experience. Not the same, similar. I like to help you in any way I can.
Annie kisses Cooper.
I don't know you very well.
No.
I'm trying to learn how to trust my instincts.
What are they telling you?
Trust.
There's no hurry.
I think maybe there is.
How so?
I think I've got a lot of catching up to do.
Cooper and Annie in the distance upon the bright water. Cooper rows to shore. Annie laughs as he helps her out of the rowboat. They step toward the familiar gazebo, now stop, embrace, and kiss. Hidden in a tree, Wyndham Earle lowers his binoculars. He's watching every move.
And I don't know, maybe it was always there, but like I think when I was younger, I didn't really realize, did that boy that she knew from high school sexually assault her?
Yeah, I see it differently now too, because I knew that when I was watching when I was a teenager, I was like, oh, she was in a bad relationship, and you know, and like many of us might have been in high school, but now I'm like, oh, what, something terrible must have happened, you know, like there's like a lot of unsaid, you know, backstory there that you can kind of fill in. So yeah, I think there was something bad that happened, which is another part of Twin Peaks, kind of like Laura's story too, right? You know, it's like this town is not so innocent as you think it is.
Yeah,
I think there's definitely trauma there for sure. I mean, obviously she tried to kill herself over it. She says it outright in that scene, and then we see the risks. And in some ways, she's confronted death in a way that Cooper never has yet. You know, Annie has. And I think, you know, by the way, if you guys haven't read this amazing book called Laura's Ghost, Women Speak About
I think I heard of that book.
Written by a brilliant lady. I got really sensitive to this stuff reading that book. Like you see it all over the place in the return. And it certainly jumped right off the page and right out of the scene that's actually in the show to me as well. I think there's a lot of trauma there. This idea of how do you confront it? Can you ever get past it? You certainly can't change time. We learned that in Twin Peaks. That doesn't ever work out the way you want it to. So you have to either move through the trauma or succumb to it. And at this moment, Annie has moved past it as best she possibly could. So,
just from a writing perspective, it makes sense. You know, she just popped up. You know, a lot of the audience would have been like, well, who's this new person? But the fact that she's a Twin Peaks resident that's coming back makes people, you know, the audience trust a bit more. And then thematically it becomes more interesting because Cooper essentially, you know, unifies bonds with Miss Twin Peaks. You know, it's kind of this, you know, final, him getting completely, you know, stuck and caught into this town.
Cooper is saying to Annie, he says, you know, I had a similar experience, not the same, similar, and I want to help you. But I thought that was a really polite and sweet way to say that, like, I don't know what you've been through. I have my own issues, my own baggage and stuff, and I hope that maybe we can work through this and talk through it. And I thought that was a sweet way, because sometimes we say, oh yeah, I know what you're going through. It's like, no, you don't. You have no idea what I'm going through, but at least you could say I'm there for you. And I don't know. I thought I don't think it was in the show, but it was a sweet thing from Cooper.
When he takes her hands and looks at her wrists and holds them, like it's just a really incredible moment, because he's, you know, she's embarrassed. I mean, you can tell she's embarrassed by it. It's like this dark thing that she doesn't want to talk about. And he's like, no, it's okay. I can face this darkness with you. I've seen some darkness too. Like you said, it's not the same, but I've seen it. And I love that moment where they're both really honest and real. And he's actually looking at her scars and not like being, you know, afraid of it or, you know, just shying away from it at all.
And Josh mentioned your book. How's your book going? I mean, I feel like everybody in Twin Peaks should know Laura's Ghost book by now, but do you, this seems like a moment to plug it. Do you want to mention about your book and how things have been with that?
Sure. So I have a book out named Laura's Ghost, Women Speak About Twin Peaks. And it's centered around the character of Laura Palmer and how the women in the Twin Peaks fan community have responded to her and what she means to them as this, you know, really important character from the show, but also in talking about trauma and sexual assault and sexual abuse. And we do get into that in the book, but there's also some more lighthearted things too. And you get to know some of the women. Cheryl Lee, I interviewed Cheryl Lee. I interviewed Grace Zabriskie, Jennifer Lynch, and Sabrina Sutherland, sort of the people surrounding the core of the character of Laura Palmer. And 10% of the proceeds go to support RAIN, the Rape, Abuse, Incest National Network. And if you'd like to buy the book, you can go to FayettevilleMafiaPress.com. It's also available for Kindle on Amazon.
Nice. I don't think I realized leading up to it that this really is like a community book. It really does. I mean, I feel like it includes a lot of people involved in it, which I think is beautiful. I think we're always stronger together when we're all here together, you know, supporting each other and stuff. And I really, I recommend everybody pick up your book. Let's support each other. Let's support writers. Also, we got Josh. Josh, you're a writer. You've got your book, A Skeleton Key to Twin Peaks. How's that been? I mean, that's something that you're donating profits to as well.
Yeah, 100% of the profits from that one. So I was able to, over the course of a few years of writing it, actually build up a nice email list by kind of giving the book away in its multiple iterations for free. And then I was able to kind of sell enough on the first 48 hours that it paid for the printing of it, which then opened up global demand for unprinting. So I've made like $2,500 and given it all away to both the David Lynch Foundation as well as the Krishnamurti Foundation. Mark Frost is a big Krishnamurti fan. So I figured if I can do some good with, my own appreciation of this work, I'm going to do it. And it's been a raving success as far as I'm concerned. I'm very happy with it.
That's awesome.
That's available on Amazon.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the
That's so
print
impressive that
version
you
is
gave-
beautiful.
Yeah,
Thank
it
you.
really is something.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And you both work so hard on these books, and it's so wonderful that they're done and they're out and people can go and get them, and that is great.
Well, and I think it's just been great to have books during the pandemic too, when you're stuck at home. And I have a print copy of Josh's book, and it's really beautiful. So, if you can get a print copy. And then also Twin Peaks Unwrapped's book came out last year.
We've got a book too.
Yeah, you got a book too. And it is so great. I mean, you have so many people from the fan community and from the show. And it's such a joy to have that book. And I go through it, and read it. And it's a wonderful journey.
Yeah, it's been something else.
Incredible how you were able to capture the best of this community and this art. There's nothing of the negative part of it. We all know what the negative part of being a Twin Peaks fan is. Like, that's all been cut away, and there's nothing but pure joy between those pages. You guys just have done a tremendous job and benefit for this community. We're really appreciative of it.
Thanks, Josh. Thank you.
Thank
I think we'll, just doing the podcast with Brian, you and I think we we have blinders on and we don't see the negative. I know it's out there, but we just kind of bring in the good people like all of you guys. I mean, that's what we live for. We love just being part of the community and sharing great ideas, and it's a really special thing.
Great Northern, bar area, night. Still wearing the cumbersome nose bandage, Dick Tremaine taps a wine glass with a knife, calling the wine tasting party to order. A dozen or so people sit in the bar area, including Ben Horne, Andy, Lucy, Lana Budding, and a few of the models from the fashion show. Everyone has 2 wine glasses in front of them and a spit bucket. On the table in front of Dick are a number of wine bottles covered in bags.
Good evening. Evening all. Welcome to our Onophiliac Soiree, another in a continuing series of public events sponsored by Horne Industries to benefit the Stop Ghostwood Development Movement.
Oh no, what?
Something to do with wine.
When my good friend Ben Horne asked me how I'd like to contribute to the good fight, I said to myself, Dick, I said, you're a former sommelier. Why not try to bring a little culture to the proceedings? I replied, but of course, a wine tasting party. Uplift the general level of quality of life at the same time we're putting money into the fight to save our trees. Voila! I should, of course, mention that our wines this evening are all courtesy of the Great Northern's wine cellar. Thank you, Ben. And now, to the tasting. Lana, Lucy, if you'd help me pour, please.
Lana and Lucy jump up to help him pour out the contents of the first tasting. Dick flirts rather obviously with Lana, which Lucy can't fail to notice. She simmers as she pours.
Our first wines tonight are reds. There are some schools of thought who of course say there are no other wines but reds.
Andy raises his hand.
Yes, Andy?
There are also white wines and sparkling wines.
Thank you, Andy.
Lana and Lucy pour wine.
Very good, Lana. Don't pour so much, Lucy.
Lucy gives another cold look to Lana and Dick.
Now that we're all poured, let's first examine...
Dick shouts at Andy, who's drinking.
Don't taste it yet, Andy, for heaven's sake.
Andy has a mouthful of wine.
Spit it out!
Andy spits into the bucket.
Sorry.
That's all right. That's what you're here for, to learn. Now to the wine. First, we must examine the nose of the wine to see what it can tell us about its bouquet. And we do that by...
By smelling?
Very good, Lana.
Another look from Lucy.
Lift the glass. Thusly.
Dick lifts it to his nose, now talking into the glass.
And while vigorously rolling the wine around in the glass, we breathe deeply and fully.
Unbeknownst to him, the wine seeps into the gauze bandage on Tremaine's nose, and a crimson blotch starts to creep cellularly upwards.
That's good. Now, procedurally, we take our first taste, a big, boisterous gulp, and roll it energetically around our entire palate, trying to involve those hard-to-reach taste buds tucked away in the back of our tongues, remembering not to swallow.
The class takes a sip and rolls it around in their mouths.
Excellent. And now we spit.
As one, the group spits noisily into their buckets.
Andy's in it.
Oh, boy.
This scene is so funny.
You're in this. What has your experience been doing these, being one of the unseen players and stuff? You get to have these scripts and you go through them and you actually tell me what you want to play. Except for me, I usually say, "Will you please play Andy again?"
I do. I pull up the episodes. I pull up to the, if it's a modified scene, I do play the scene. And it's kind of like what they say the SNL people do, is that all week when they got to do an impression, they just put a cassette tape, well, it used to be a cassette tape, and they would just listen to that voice, kind of over and over again. And that's what I just try to do, is just kind of pick up on little ticks here and there.
Nice. I like that.
Oh my God, I love this scene so much. That I think Dick Tremaine and what's the actor's name he plays? And I totally lost his name right out of my brain.
Ian Buchanan.
Yeah. So Scott Ryan interviewed him in his movie. If you guys haven't seen that in a while, it's worth going back to rewatch this scene, because you know Scott and you know him, and they're having this conversation, and he admits during this that he's never watched a scene of Twin Peaks. Never went back to watch it at all. Maybe he has in the years since. Knowing that, and then going back and watching him act in this, like he just gave it everything, and he's almost making fun of it at the same time he's acting. I feel like on some level this guy's like, this is ridiculous, but I'm gonna just really punch through this. He's hilarious in the scene with the little dab of wine on his bandage on his nose. I mean, come on, that stuff's great.
He's spitting out the wine.
Yeah.
The wine. I think the one thing with this deleted scene or extended scene is really that it explains why Dick is involved. Like, he's like, kind of like, I want to bring some class to this and stuff like that. Like, Ben told me about it, and like, well, you should be doing a wine tasting, and you should be using your wine from the Great Northern so we can do this. So typical in some ways that, like, he says he wants to do class, but it seems like he just wants something for himself that he can show off.
Yeah, he kind of reminds me of, like, in small towns, there's the person who thinks they're above, everybody else in the town. Like in any other city, he would just be another person, but he's he works in the department store, and he's classy compared to everybody else, and he loves to like lord that over everybody.
Yes, great.
As the spinoff, Dick Tremaine goes to the big city and finds he's a small fish in a big pond.
Oh,
that'd be great.
And Josh, what is something that interests you about this last episode here that we're going to cover?
So a couple things. Well, a few things. So the first one was, I love the scene with the mayor where Ben Horne comes in to pitch his case for the Pine Weasel Stop Ghostwood project, which, is total crap. But the mayor at one point is like, "What are you selling? What is he selling?" It was like he just called him out on it. It was so good. And then something that really jumped out to me, there's a scene where there's a hooded figure, and you guys are going to have to help me out. This hooded figure comes back, but no face, hooded figure, and then there's a white background behind them, and an owl comes flying out at the camera. So that immediately made me think of the white scene where Audrey comes out of it in The Return. Like this idea of a placeholder for something inside of this white world, right? And the idea that Audrey could have been the image to fill that at some point is interesting to me. Do they bring that character back? Do you guys know? It's been a long time since I've seen the show.
They don't bring the character back, and to me that character is, what does Hawk say to Cooper about the Black Lodge, that you'll face the dweller on the threshold?
The dweller on the threshold.
Right.
Yeah.
But when we get to episode 29, the last episode of season 2, I think Cooper was supposed to meet this guy. Like, so
yeah.
Lynch just scraps it all. Like 20 minutes of the show, he just scraps, and there's all this stuff where Cooper runs into people, and I think that's what he would have faced. It was I believe, this hooded figure. But yeah, he never shows
that
up.
happens. That comes back in the episode that Cooper wakes up inside of the hospital. So like that's interesting. That's really interesting to me. I'm not saying they planned it. I don't think they did. But as a viewer, just dealing with what's on the screen and trying to make connections between these things that, you know, have no logistical connections. They probably didn't have intentional connections, but they do have mythological connections. They're there. We have to deal with them. So I like that idea of a through line that started way back in season 2 that we can kind of pull out to what happens in the return. That was really interesting to me.
Yeah.
And then the Annie Blackburn stuff, Courtney, to go back to that, I think she's such an important character. You know, really, she wasn't in the show very long, all things considered. It's what, 7 or 8 episodes, maybe 6 or 7 episodes. So it's not a lot of time to develop a character and have them provide a gateway for Cooper. I think he really did change as a result of coming in contact with Annie. And that scene with John Justice Wheeler where they're in front of the fire and they have this conversation about love. There was a lot that was revealed in that scene. That was actually a really important scene. This idea of 2 men who don't know each other, both at the top of their game in their worlds, completely undone by their love they have for another person. I think it was a really beautiful moment. I'm a fan of that scene quite a bit.
Yeah, definitely.
Quick back to the hooded figure and the owl. The last moment is that fire explosion, which then you'll start seeing in the finale, but then Lynch uses it really heavy in Wild at Heart.
Oh, that's
that just
great.
burst of fire explosion. Yeah,
that's great.
Well, that pretty much covers, I think, these episodes, and I was impressed. We get it within the hour. We get on. we used to go through every scene, and I think it's more fun. I think just to hear what you guys have to say about what interests you about these episodes is really something. I gotta say, Josh, I really love Diane episode that you guys covered on your podcast with John Horne. Yeah, you guys are on top of your game. I'm really enjoying. You gotta share more. You gotta promote your podcast. Tell us more about this.
Yeah, it's I started off as just a conversation between John Thorne and myself, and I try to leave as much space in there as possible to let John finish his entire thought, which can sometimes take a little bit to get out, but once it's out, guy just thinks in such fascinating ways about Twin Peaks. I mean, he really does think about it a lot, and his thoughts are very deep and compelling. So he kind of draws me in, and every 5 weeks or 6 weeks we'll be like, hey, are you ready to talk again? It's just a great conversation. I think it gives John a very nice room within which to really flex his muscles. He writes a lot, and I think that's pretty stressful on him. So having a place where he can just come and talk. And we have different views of Twin Peaks, just like we all do. But at the end of the day, we can come together emotionally and agree that, this is still a work of art that brings us together, not tears us apart. So.
And Josh, don't sell yourself short. In Our House Now podcast, you really bring it as well. I mean, the both of you guys are a great collaboration, and I think it's really interesting. It's definitely the top Twin Peaks podcast that I listen to right now.
Look at the company we're in.
It's so good. It's so good.
You're very kind. Thank you kindly.
Well, that's awesome. So I guess we should go around and just if you want to share how people can follow you, and you guys can plug your stuff again, and we'll start with Andy.
Oh, just ABUDDAH on Twitter. I did help the guys out with some podcast art. If you need some help with that type of thing, you can certainly send me a note. And with everything wrapping up, just want to reiterate everything everyone said about the community. We've seen where fandom communities can get very toxic, and for a property like this that is so obtuse that there's no one right answer, the fact that everyone has been so good to each other is really awesome.
Yeah. Andy, I know I'm sure we've said it to you before, but thank you so much for all your support and that logo. And the one we're talking about is that original Cooper and the chevron design.
I have the shirt.
And the shirt. That's so cool. And that originally design, I think Brian and I had very, very few things we said to you, and you really just came up with it all on your own. And I remember seeing that. It's like, wow, that's exactly what we want. I mean, unwrapping Twin Peaks. You've seen that. I think if people need help, I mean, Andy's out there. You should contact him about other things if you need help.
And a little known fact, when Andy sent us that logo, I was like, well, I guess we got to do a podcast now. Because we have a logo.
So that was it.
That was it. I'm like, well, there's no turning back now.
Oh, no.
Andy, what else do you like to draw about? What other shows do you love?
Shows, like I said, Buffy, Lost, a lot of the big dramas there. And then for silly stuff in college, Space Ghost Coast to Coast was a really interesting one, the way that they would just take old CNN interviews initially and chop them up. And those early days of Adult Swim where it was really kind of guerrilla, that was a lot of cool stuff.
And Courtney, how can people follow you and get your book?
Follow me on Twitter at Courtenay Cal. It's spelled COURTENAYCAL. And you can get my book at Laura's Ghost at FayetteVilleMafiaPress.com. I'm also one of the editors of the Blue Rose magazine, BlueRoseMag.com. We're still producing magazines, so if you're interested in Twin Peaks and David Lynch, Mark Frost, follow us and subscribe.
And Josh?
I'm on Twitter and Instagram at Joshua Minton, and you can find my Twin Peaks book at Amazon. You can find it on my website, jdmintonwriter.com. I'm writing a new book on an English show called This Is England right now. You can't watch it here in the United States. You can only watch the movie in the first season, but there are 2 seasons unavailable. I had to buy a Region 2 DVD player to even get it. But I fell in love with this show a few years ago, and it has really pushed me in a way that I haven't felt since I started writing about Twin Peaks. So I think folks over here in America are really going to like this show when they get a hold of it. So
can you give the elevator pitch of what this show is?
Yeah, it's a show about, it takes place in the 1980s. It's a show about white skinheads in England who are suffering under Margaret Thatcher's rule. And it's a show about poverty and sexual abuse and the marginalization of people and just the cycle of violence. A lot of themes very, very similar to Twin Peaks, where, Twin Peaks might kind of dissolve that in mystery and music. This Is England kind of punches you in the face with it. So in some ways it's refreshing. In others, it's much harder to deal with. So tough stuff.
Yeah, it's funny when you said the title. I said, "Oh, it's a comedy, right?" It's definitely not.
There are funny things in it, but it's definitely not a comedy.
Oh. And again, I mentioned, you should In Our House Now podcast with John Thorne. You should definitely check that out. That should be subscribed. You should be, because I don't always know when it's going to come out, but I know that if I subscribe, I'll get it whenever you guys have a new show out.
That's right. Yeah, we'll do a new episode here in the next few weeks. We got a couple of ideas. These themes pop up, and we'll just text each other and say, "Hey, have you thought of a new one?" And off we go.
And I think that this is helping John to probably write some new stuff. I'm hoping.
I think so. Yeah, I do. It's like therapy in a way, right?
Yeah. Well, thank you, everyone. This has been great.
Thanks, Ben.
Thank you.
Thanks, Brennan.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Cool.
And thank you, guys. And if you have a comment, question, or theory, give us an email at twinpeaksunwrapped@gmail.com. Like us on the old Facebook. Follow us on Twitter at Twin Peaks Unwrapped. Give us a 5-star review on iTunes. Subscribe to us, and we'll be back in a week or two.
Pursuit by Bear is actually a stage direction. Some of you may know from The Winter's Tale, played by Shakespeare. Act 3, Scene 3. Exit, pursued by a bear, is what Shakespeare wrote. And an actor is chased off stage, and he actually meets an untimely end by the bear. We will talk about that. Anyway, this is what we're having tonight. This is the 2015, my latest vintage. It's a combination of Cabernet and Merlot. It's a beautiful blend. I think it's one of the best, perhaps the best I've made to date. We're enjoying it now with a steak, which I think it pairs so beautifully. A great example of what Washington can do with Cab and Merlot. So, there we go. Cheers.